The problem of Zarankiewicz, as he told it to me, motivated him to study combinatorial problems. Actually, he told me he left information theory. I don't know if this is the full truth in the mid of the 70s. But he had remarkable results. One of the theorems is bearing his name, the Ahlswede-Daykin inequality. We should remember that this plays also David Daykin, who passed away just a few months before Rudolf Ahlswede. And we have here his daughter Jacky Daykin. She's a professor of mathematics herself in, not quite, okay, but in King's College in London. And so she knows the mathematics and also the story behind the Ahlswede-Daykin.
Okay, I've put together a little presentation to show to you all today. Yes, thanks very much to the organisers for inviting me to join in this occasion, and thank you very much to the family being very hospitable and putting us up, and also the Hiltons that are here together. This particular photo, I think everybody here will have seen it. I picked this up from Wikipedia. I particularly like this photo, and I did notice Trixie saying that how often Rudy was just in a world of his own. And I feel with this particular photo, there is very much an inward-looking feeling to the photo. You can just kind of feel him concentrating, thinking, working, and so on. I really like this particular one. And just beneath the surface is the sense of humour just there, about to break out. I really do like this one. I'm just also going to tell a very tiny story, not about Rudy, but about Sasha, Rudy's son. It's incredible for me. I'm actually quite overwhelmed being here today. It is 33 years since I was at Bielefeld when my father was here. And so we stopped in the cafeteria en route to the ZIF. And I can remember Sasha, so when I came before, he was just this high. And he was messing about on the tables and spilt things and climbing around and so on. And his father was there, and you were absolutely right how you described his manner of child raising, very laid back, very sophisticated. It was wonderful. So David and Rudy met at, sorry for speaking in English, and I'm just going to give this one a go, the Mathematisches Forschungsinstitut Oberwolfach. So I actually happened to be there that year. I was visiting some friends in Germany, so I tagged along with my parents and stopped off with them in Oberwolfach. So this is the time, 1977, when Rudy and David were working on the four functions theorem, okay? And I can actually remember my father, he had prepared a draft of the paper. And my father had a kind of philosophy of life. Why walk from A to B when you can run, skip, and jump? And I can remember him taking a draft of the paper over to Rudy. Rudy was sitting at a table in Oberwolfach. He was surrounded by papers. He was surrounded by mathematicians. He was surrounded by smoke, of course. And David, my father, went up to him, showed him the draft, and Rudy turned to him and he said, "Oh, I see. My name is first." It was lovely. With a name like Ahlswede, I think he's usually first, and usually well-deserved, of course. And so in 1978, what happened was my sister and I decided to go touring around Europe. My father was here again in Bielefeld, and so we thought, okay, let's just go and visit the Ahlswedes. So there we were in our little car, and we came to the house, and I would like once again to thank Trixie and the whole family for the hospitality shown to our family on many occasions. I think that was wonderful. And I'm just wondering if Trixie is going to remember this particular incident I'm going to talk about. Now, I don't tell stories as well as Sasha. I'll give this a go if you all promise to laugh. But anyway, my father was not the greatest chess player. He just dabbled from time to time. Not like Rudy at all. My sister and I, Babs and I, basically weren't chess players. So we were just, learning how to move the pieces, etc. So we were playing against my father. So 2 against 1. So we were sitting there playing away, and Rudy was in the room, and he was walking up and down, smoking, of course. He would come over to see what was going on in the game, look down at the game, and my sister and I were almost at the level of, shall we move the horsey piece over there, this kind of thing. So Rudy would look down and say, why don't you do this? And so we would keep going to him, shh, let us think. Oh, off you go. Shh. Anyway, somehow Babs and I stumbled into a winning position. Only we didn't realize it. So again, Rudy came over, looked down, in a flash saw the whole configuration of the board, and he could not control himself. And he said, speedy, speedy, take, checkmate. And this phrase, speedy, speedy, we incorporated it into our family, and it's been repeated many, many times over the years. But one of the things that Rudy said when we saw him last year was about himself and David. He said that the chemistry was right. They kind of definitely liked each other as friends, and also they had a similar, approach to work, and he said that they both liked practical things. So in the theoretical world of mathematics, they were on the practical fringe there working. Okay, so I was asked to talk to you about their collaboration. So this is what I've been able to find, these 5 particular papers. So not actually that prolific, in all honesty. As far as I understand, Rudy had at least 20 collaborators, I think, plus students, I think, anyway. So he worked with a great number of people, and he wrote a lot of papers with some of his co-authors. So this is not that much. However, this is the year 1977, 78, 79, 80. Email was only just starting to kick in at that stage. So I think had they been in closer proximity, I would imagine that they would have produced more results. However, they did kick off with a bit of a splash. So this paper, number 1, let me just see what the actual proper title is here. Okay, so this is an inequality for the weights of 2 families of sets, their unions and intersections, otherwise known as the 4 functions inequality. And it has actually become quite a celebrated result. And when I was sort of looking around, preparing this presentation to come here, I was quite surprised at how much material there is on the web about this particular result. Okay, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a second. The second paper was talking about how a lot of other known inequalities are special cases of their new inequality. Paper number 3, I think, was some enumeration results on subsets of sets, possibly Boolean topics. Number 4, correlation inequality, dealing with integrals. And then number 5, a problem submitted to the American Mathematical Monthly. Hopefully they solved it, but I'm not even too sure of that detail. So let's just look at number 1 a little bit more. I just happen to have picked up the same photo that you've used here for the remembrance occasion. This photo of my father was actually taken in 2008. So I think both of them were looking quite a bit younger in 1978. Okay, now what I thought would be rather nice, instead of me talking to you about this particular result, I thought it would be very nice if Rudy talks to you about this particular result. And I have a very short sound clip, 3 minutes, that we're just going to hopefully play. It's not easy, because it's a tape of a talk, it's not easy to hear what he says. I will write up a few things just to make it a bit clearer.
And then we started. I invited him. I was building a library in the high school of the house, carrying lots of heavy things. And Daykin had told me his beautiful result. You have a family of subsets of an n set, A, cardinality, B, another one of those sets. Then you take in the Minkowski sense, so yes, all units of members of A with members of B, and the unions, and the same for the intersections, all combinations. So you get two new families of sets, yes? And there's always this inequality. He had stated it somewhat differently. Instead of sets, he was speaking about lattices. And he proved the result that this inequality holds even only if the lattice is distributive. Still a very nice result. And he wanted to tell me the proof. I said, David, don't tell me the proof. I want to prove it. The first thing I want to understand, what if you don't take union here, but if you take symmetric difference, for instance? Is it still true? Turns out it is. But my idea of proving it was looking at cross-sections of the sets. And the cross-sections I described by function. We look at probabilities, but we don't have to speak about it. So I came to 4 cross-sections. And they are the alpha, beta, gamma, delta. And then we got the following theorem. If you have locally alpha of A, beta of B, less than alpha, well, I should actually use big letters here, but doesn't matter. And times alpha, beta, gamma, delta, times the mean. So if this is true for all A and B, so it's locally true, then it holds for the difference. So from local to global. And this turned out to be. And then this was quick, well, we wrote it down, David was very quick, but actually my idea was much more technical. Instead of making things binary, if you look at 0-1 sequence for sets, I went immediately to finite sets. So I also didn't take unions, I took any binary operations. Find spine, make it S plus S to X, and we have another one, let's say phi prime, if psi prime, S and T cross T to T, who have for a quadruple alpha, beta, gamma, the local property. Yes? And the local global property. So if it's true for the alphas, for this pair of maps, and it's true for those one, then it's true for the product. I combine those operations. So it is really a statement about the Cartesian product and not about lattices. So it's much more general. But David said, let's publish it in this form, because everybody thinks about FTJ inequality. Yes? The FTJ.
Okay, I hope you got some of that. Yeah, okay, so I think these are the results that would have been talked about in their second paper. So you see the Ahlswede-Daykin inequality sitting there fairly centrally, and there's lots of other inequalities that turn out to be a special case. Fishburne-Shep dealing with partial orders, Harris-Kleitman upsets and downsets, FKG inequality having one function or weight, Holly inequality having two functions or weights, Ahlswede-Daykin 4 functions or weights, and then finally about 15 years later the generalization by Rino, Sachs, and independently Acharoni and Kaisch. Okay. Then what happened was, quite sadly, my father actually died last year. Quite different to Rudy, that the family had to endure this terrible shock. In our particular case, my father had a brain tumor, so it was a bit slower. So, you know, we had the slow torture, but not a shock. I'm not quite sure which is worse. However, this triggered Rudy making a trip to England. So I'm going to tell you about that. Some of you here will have known my father. I'm just going to say that the black and white photo is when he held a chair at the University of Malaya, and that's him just relaxing on the beach near Kuala Lumpur. Yes, so Professor Hilton invited Rudy to come over. Anthony holds an annual Old Codgers meeting, and my father had died just about the time of the meeting, so he held it mainly in memory of my father this particular year. And I think it was just wonderful that Rudy came over to be with us. And so he gave this series of talks, which in fact is his last series of international talks. And we really were quite honoured, Anthony and my son Alexander and myself, to be present at these talks. The first one at Reading University. Rudy was interested in a result by Hilton and Milner, and he had proved it using the shifting operator of his own work together with Kashatrian. The next day we were up at King's College, and he was looking at shadows under the word-subword relation, joint work with Lebedev. And then on to Queen Mary, and he just gave a wonderful talk, just so many ideas flying around with this GTIT, his general theory of information transfer. That was just a very full, rich talk. Now, I thought it was really very nice of Rudy. He brought a copy of his book. Many of you here will be familiar with his book. This is the collection of 50 papers in honour of his 60th birthday. And he seemed to be very pleased that my father had contributed 3 papers, actually papers 8, 9 and 10. So, for example, 10 was on shifts of cascades. And so there still was a connection and a friendship between the two men. I think it's very easy for us to think that numbers, information and complexity sum up Rudy. Yes, in a sense, but what about, as soon as you're in contact with Rudy, sooner or later history comes into the conversation, poetry, philosophy. It's just a very well-rounded, very rich individual. But I thought it was very nice of him to bring this big, heavy book over to England for me. Okay, so this is the programme for the Old Codgers one-day combinatorics colloquium that Anthony Hilton organises annually. Now, I've put down the meaning of codger in blue at the bottom. At this particular day, Rudy leant over to me and he said, "What is this codger? What does it mean?" So I thought I'd better put in an explanation. It's a very affectionate term, and it refers to eccentric but amusing old men in general. I think men more than ladies. Would you agree, Anthony? Is that? So we had a very nice programme that particular day. Roland Hagvist was over from Sweden talking about Latin squares. Kurt Lindner from the USA talking about two-fold cycle systems. Don't take any notice of Rudy's talk announced here. One of the things that you learn about mathematicians is they do things their way. And so the announced talk was not the talk that he gave. It's just how, you just have to get used to how mathematicians operate. And I had to learn this growing up with one. I actually talked about string combinatorics. Mike Baines talked about coprime mappings between sets of consecutive integers. This was some joint work with my father, and I learned at this meeting that they went to Cambridge many, many years ago and gave a seminar on this particular topic. And apparently my father slept in Newton's bed at Cambridge. I was quite impressed to learn that. And Pete Cameron gave a wonderful talk on matroid theory. So I've just got some photos left really for the rest of the presentation, but we really just want to share with you these last talks of Rudy. So here he is at the Old Codgers one-day combinatorics colloquium at Reading, and it really is just so wonderful to hear him talk and just to sort of hear the depth of his knowledge and so on. So there he is. one more at Reading. So this is the 3rd of November. And this is really just, I think, about 6 weeks before we lost Rudy. So I lost my father in the August, and this meeting was in the November, and then we lost Rudy in December. And 2 nights ago, together with Sasha, my son Alexander, and I, we had a wonderful dinner in a real German pub out in the country, and we really had wonderful time talking to each other and comforting each other. You know, we really had quite a heavy emotional situation. So here's the old codger's dinner that some of us managed to get to in the evening. I'm just going to quickly run through the names, starting on the far left with Roland Hagvis, next to him Bill Jackson, David Penman, Anthony's wife Mary. Rudy is back in the shadows wearing the white top, and then really in the shadows behind him is my older son Paris. I do just want to thank Paris because he took it of his own initiative to actually record the talks that day. So that's how we have that recording of, you know, one of the last talks of Rudy, and he just organised that little snippet that I played for you. So that's Paris. Then unfortunately it's just the backs, but the furthest person at the back is Peter Cameron, then my son Alexander, who's present today, Anthony Hilton, Bridget Calderon, and Mike Baines in the foreground, who had this joint result with my father, and then they ended up going to Cambridge and Newton's bed and so forth. I think this is a lovely photograph here. So this is Mary Hilton together with Rudy. I think that's a really lovely shot. And I would like also to thank Mary for showing hospitality and putting Rudy up when he came to England. And Mary, I just want to point out, unlike myself, Mary has a unique talent for English people. She can speak a foreign language fluently, and that happens to include German. So do chat away with her if you bump into her at the symposium. I don't have any photos of when Rudy spoke at King's, but he did seem to be quite chuffed doing this tour around of these universities. So here is one of the campuses of King's College, a Strand campus, right on the Strand next to the River Thames. And that particular view of the river, that's almost the view that we had from the seminar room where Rudy was talking, just a little bit further to the right, looking at Big Ben. And Rudy sort of walked in and said, "Oh, is this the seminar room? It's very nice." So he seemed to like that. I'd just like the family to see, you know, Rudy's last trip to England. These are the nice bits of King's College. Half of it's always under construction. And again, I don't have a picture of Rudy actually talking, giving his last lecture on GTIT. But again, this is the Queen Mary University of London, where Anthony happens to be a research professor also. It's quite an amazing place. On one side, next to a fairly busy road, another side is a canal, another side is a cemetery. It's quite sort of rich and steeped in history. But the modern buildings on the far left, that photo, I think, I'm just going to check this with Anthony, I think that's the view when you come out of the maths building where Rudy was talking. So I think he more or less walked along there. Just wanted to share that. Okay, so after Rudy gave his talk, en route to the pub, of course, where we had to go and have a drink, we stopped off in Alexander's dorm room. I hope you know what a dorm is, a dormitory room. And so here we are just, I'm not quite sure why we went to Alexander's room now, but anyway, we stopped off there for some reason, doing a tour around Queen Mary. So Anthony Hilton was actually, I think, the first PhD student of my father, possibly. Think so. I'd just like to say that Anthony survived being supervised by my father. And they. Then he went off to Malaya, that's right, and had other students out there. And Anthony also had joint papers with my father. And that's actually me in the background. I think this GTIT stuff sort of exhausted us. It was a very full talk. Do you remember that, Anthony? So many ideas flying around. It was just wonderful stuff. Yes, so in King's College, believe it or not, there's this really beautiful chapel. And what had happened in November was Rudy gave his talk, and then together with Anthony and Mary, we had a stroll around the particular campus, and we just went into the chapel just to sort of have a look. And this was quite soon after I'd lost my father, and it was just a wonderful moment. Rudy sat down while I lit a candle for my father, and he said to me, "Oh, that's really nice." I don't have a particular religion, but I think when you have heavy emotional experiences, any spiritual house is just a wonderful support. Well, then, as you know, just before Christmas, the news came through about Rudy. And then just after Christmas, in January, I was back up at King's for another meeting. And I was sitting in the talk. I just simply couldn't concentrate. So I just went a few doors down to the chapel. And in that particular time, this is really a comment to family, I lit a candle to both of them. And I put it up on the high altar right at the back of the chapel. So, I would just like to, say in loving memory to Rudy and David. We wonder what they're up to now. We we don't have any particular beliefs in afterlife and so forth, but who knows? They might be doing some mass together. And thanks very much again to the organisers, and condolences to family. We're sharing a big experience here. Thank you.